Hello, I'm Tony Kaye. Welcome to Property Point. I'm joined as usual by Nerida Consibee.
Thanks for having me.
Nerida, just wanted to talk about what you're seeing in the market at the moment.
Yeah, so we're starting to see a slowdown in demand, and it's interesting, it's most apparent in New South Wales and ACT. So Victoria's slowing, Queensland is slowing, South Australia is slowing, but really New South Wales and ACT seems to be hit hardest.
Is that right across the board, or is it in specific segments of the market?
It does seem to be apartment demand that's being hit hardest, and it's not really surprising. I mean, if you have a look at who owns apartments, we know from ABS data that around 60% of apartments are rented, so most of them would be owned by investors. And what's happening to them is that they're continuing to find it very difficult to get finance. So they're being hit by a lot of the finance restrictions that banks are putting on are being put on investors. So not just local investors, but offshore investors. But also, you know, there's changes to stamp duty concessions for off the plan. You know, there's a lot of new taxes for foreign buyers. So there's all these buyers, investor buyers that are being impacted. And given that the majority of apartments are investor owned and these buyers are backing off, it's really starting to have a huge impact.
Yeah, there's different factors there, isn't there? APRA's tightened up the lending policies, you know, on what the banks can do for interest-only loans specifically. But obviously that's starting to flow through into the data.
Yeah, and I mean, and if you look at it from a bank's perspective, you can see why they're targeting investors. I mean, investors are seen as higher risk than, say, an owner-occupier. I mean, most owner-occupiers would do anything they can to save their family home. And, you know, if interest rates increase, they're going to do what they can to keep their home. But investors are obviously a lot different. And of course, most investors will try to hold on. But, you know, there has been instances in the past where the market has turned and we've started to see investors walk away from investments that they've made, and that can be higher risk for the banks.
Is that happening at the moment?
No, it's not happening. I mean, it's interesting. You know, we're not seeing defaults, high levels of default. We're not seeing many people walk away from purchases that they made off the plan. You know, it's more, I think, interest. So it's more the future pipeline that's being impacted, and already approvals have come down. So apartment approvals are coming down. That will continue to reduce over time. Maybe not a problem in places like Melbourne and Brisbane, which are fairly well supplied at the moment. So, you know, that high level of supply will probably keep those cities going for at least a year or so. Big problem in Sydney. So, I mean, Sydney's pipeline has been fairly restricted over a long time period, and it is a very expensive city to live in. So, you know, any future development being restricted is a bit of a problem for that city.
Yeah. What we've heard, and I think we might have talked about this last time, is that there's quite a lot of demand coming from Sydney into Victoria now, just because of and also into Brisbane, I believe, you know, as a result of people moving to more affordable markets.
Yeah, I mean, regional areas are also being positively impacted by Sydney's pricing problems as well. I mean, Wollongong, Central Coast have now been doing quite well for a prolonged period, but we did some research recently into where people from Sydney were looking, and around 2/3 of them were looking both within the Sydney metro area but also in regional areas. So places like Orange are doing quite well. I mean, Orange has got quite a bit of jobs growth as a result of some government employment there. Port Macquarie, surprisingly, has been doing quite well on our side as well. So in addition to Melbourne, in addition to Brisbane, Gold Coast is another one that we're still seeing really, really elevated levels of demand.
Oh, good, Nerida. Thanks very much for joining us again.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again next time on Property Point.
Did you know that your membership gives you access to our analyst Q&A section? Every week, our Intelligent Investor analyst team answer members' questions on investing in ASX-listed companies. If you would like an analyst's opinion on your investment queries, go to the Q&A section of any of our websites to read or ask a question.